Artlist.io.
What's up, to viewers? My name is Pax, and I'm back to react. So if you're seeing my face, you're in the right place. What if we never landed on the moon? What if it was all a hoax? What if they've been lying to us this entire time? I'm going to go over here to Signal 33, and we're going to check in on this content that seems to suggest that the government has been lying to us this entire time about not only landing on the moon, but being on the moon at all. So we're going to go over here to Signal 33, and we're going to check out this content. You guys go over there, tap in with them, subscribe to the channel, and see what they got going on for more content. And until then, I'm going to go over here and see what they got to say. And of course, I'm going to leave my colorful commentary along the way. I hope they ain't been lying to us this whole time, because that would be crazy. We got Richard Nixon right here to set it off. Talk to us, man. What's going on? I am not a crook.
By 1968, the new president, Richard Nixon, was staring at Kennedy's deadlines with less than 2 years remaining and a space program that was behind schedule, over budget, and reeling from disaster. It was in this atmosphere of institutional panic that someone asked the question that would change the course of history. What if America didn't actually have to go? In April of 1968, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey premiered in Washington, D.C. The film was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The spacecraft looked real. The zero-gravity sequences were physically convincing. The lunar surface was so detailed, so immersive, that audiences genuinely struggled to distinguish Kubrick's fiction from documentary footage. Someone in the Nixon administration saw the film and had a very dangerous idea. The details of what happened next remained classified for decades. What the declassified records now shows is this. In late 1968, a small team from the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence visited Kubrick at his estate in England. They explained the situation. They appealed to his patriotism. They offered unlimited resources, complete creative control, and something Kubrick valued more than money: the chance to create something no filmmaker had ever attempted.
That's crazy as hell. So the CIA went to this movie producer and had him come up with an entire hoax that was portrayed to the U.S. public and to the world as a moon landing, a lunar moon landing, or essentially where astronauts took off on a rocket and went to the moon. Landed on the moon, walked around on the moon. You know, we've all seen footage and we've all heard the conversations with the president and the famous, you know, one small step and one big giant leap for mankind. You know, and we've heard all the propaganda, and there's actual documentation here. There's actual declassified documentation and people that worked on this hoax along with the CIA to pass this off, all in a political effort to beat our competitors, which seemed to be at the time the Russians and the Chinese. We wanted to beat them to the moon. And so you guys just heard it right there in the beginning of this video where it was declassified that this actually took place, that the CIA actually came up with this hoax. I don't know. You guys let me know in the chat what y'all believe. Everybody, this is just the content. You're entitled to believe whatever it is you want to believe. I just wanted to know what y'all think about this.
Kubrick agreed. The production that followed was the most technically ambitious filmmaking operation in history, and it had to be invisible. Kubrick's first problem was gravity. The moon has 1/6 Earth's gravitational pull. Astronauts on the lunar surface would move in ways impossible to replicate with wires or harnesses. Kubrick's solution: film everything in slow motion and play it back at normal speed.
So this is all footage of alleged astronauts on the moon's surface dancing around, jumping around. One of them fell down, and then there's all these conspiracy theories that, that it wasn't real to begin with and that they used wires and all this other stuff. But here it is now, after this information has been declassified, it's coming out that this was a Hollywood production.
At 1969 broadcast resolution, grainy, compressed, transmitted through hundreds of thousands of miles of simulated static, the effect was convincing enough. The second problem was lighting. The moon has no atmosphere, no diffused light. Every shadow on the lunar surface should be razor sharp, parallel, and absolutely black. Studio lighting produces the opposite: soft shadows from multiple sources. Kubrick had to engineer massive collimated light arrays that mimicked a single distant light source. He had to make his lighting look less professional to match what the moon would actually produce. And the third problem was the surface itself. Kubrick's team constructed a soundstage the size of 3 football fields in a restricted area of the Nevada test site. They covered it with tons of volcanic ash to simulate lunar regolith. Sections of the set were vacuum sealed to eliminate airborne dust particles. Because on the moon, with no atmosphere, dust doesn't float. The fourth problem, and the most dangerous, was the Soviet Union. Soviet tracking stations monitored every NASA transmission.
Right.
If Apollo 11 never left Earth's orbit, Soviet analysts would know within hours.
Yeah, because they have the satellites. We all have satellites tracking each other, each country, the big countries, the powerhouses. And so they would have known if America launched a rocket within hours probably of it being launched, and they would have been able to see it on their tracking satellites if they had. So what they're saying is that, for this hoax to have been pulled off, they had to do this in silence, but also getting the attention of the Soviets to make it seem real.
The radio signals wouldn't carry the right delay. The trajectory data wouldn't match. So the mission had to actually launch.
Right.
On July 16th, 1969, Apollo 11 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center in front of 100,000 spectators. The Saturn V rocket performed flawlessly. The spacecraft reached Earth orbit, and then it did not go to the moon. Instead, Apollo 11 entered a carefully calculated elliptical orbit designed to remain consistent with Soviet tracking expectations during the critical lunar transit phase. The real spacecraft stayed in Earth orbit, while on a soundstage in Nevada, Kubrick rolled the cameras. The astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, were in the spacecraft for the duration, maintaining the radio communications that Soviet global tracking stations would monitor. The lunar surface footage was transmitted to NASA's Mission Control in Houston, which broadcast it to the world with the appropriate 1.3 second signal delay.
So they had a sound stage going in Nevada in some remote location out in a desert where they brought in volcanic ash and tons of ash and sand and created a Hollywood movie soundstage where they had astronauts jumping around and pretending to be on the moon, broadcasting it live to the world while a rocket orbited the Earth in space to give other footage. So this was an entire scheme, an entire hoax that was devised by the CIA in the United States of America.
600 million people watched the broadcast on July 20th, 1969. They saw Armstrong descend the ladder. They heard the words,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
None of it was real. The Soviets were suspicious. Their tracking data was inconclusive. Not definitively wrong, but not definitively right either. But exposing the fraud would mean admitting they had lost the space race to a film set, and that their own tracking capabilities had failed to detect the deception.
Right.
So Moscow chose to stay silent. The lie held. For decades, the psychological deterioration of the Apollo 11 crew was attributed to the pressures of fame, the disorientation of post-mission life, and the ordinary struggles of men who had experienced something extraordinary.
So they created a narrative that the astronauts that went to space and walked on the moon had achieved something so extraordinary, the biggest achievement of mankind up to that date. And afterwards, they kind of were going through, obviously they were watched by the media and in front of the cameras. And so whatever happened in their private lives afterwards was broadcast to the world. And so any downward spirals, any personal effects that they were having was the narrative was because they had achieved something so great and sensational, or maybe it was effects from space, or they came up with a bunch of different things. But what actually was the case was they knew everything was a lie, and the CIA was involved. So they were probably messing with them to some degree and forcing them, threatening them. I don't know. We'll see. But to stay quiet about this hoax.
The declassified documents tell a very different story. In 2019, a tranche of previously sealed CIA files was released under a mandatory declassification review. Among them were records from a subprogram of MKUltra, the CIA's notorious mind control program, which was designated internally as Apollo Subset. The documents reveal that Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins were subjected to a series of conditioning protocols in the months before the mission.
Wow.
The program's stated objective was to ensure psychological compliance, suppress guilt responses, and create what the files described as durable cognitive partitioning.
So just think about that, man. That is crazy, crazy work. So they came up with this entire hoax, allegedly. It's for you guys to decide what you want to believe. But this is declassified information at the highest level. And, there's no way to debunk what is being said now about the fact that this was a Hollywood production and it was all a lie. And then it goes on to say that, these guys, and particularly Buzz Aldrin, couldn't it crushed them. The guilt that was associated with these lies and the things that they had to suppress. And Buzz Aldrin specifically was in the CIA. He was actually a CIA handler for the other astronauts. So you guys, I invite you guys to go and check out the rest of this content. See what y'all want to find out for yourselves, man. Challenge yourself to think outside the box. I don't know. Did we go to the moon? Did we not go to the moon? You guys let me know in the chat. If this is your first time to the channel, please share the channel with someone else. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Keeps me in the algorithm, and I appreciate y'all. Until next time, go outside, do something positive, be inspired, or be an inspiration to someone else. Until next time, I'm out of here.